The sun had only just started climbing over the rolling plains of Red Clay Valley when Luke Carver stepped out of his farmhouse and breathed in the cool air that drifted off the grasslands. His ranch was quiet at this hour except for the distant lowing of cattle and the soft rustling of chickens, waking in the coop beside the barn. Luke tugged on his gloves and headed toward the coop, thinking only about the chores that waited for him, unaware that this morning would change everything he believed about danger, justice, and the thin line between mercy and wrath. As he approached the chicken pen, he noticed the hens clustered in one corner instead of wandering around the yard. Their feathers were puffed up in agitation, and their clucks carried a sharp edge. Luke frowned. Usually this meant a snake or maybe a stray coyote had come by, though the fence was high enough to keep most predators out. He unlatched the gate and stepped inside, scanning the ground and corners carefully. That was when he saw her. A girl no older than 13 crouched in the far corner of the pen, her arms wrapped around her knees and her dark hair hanging in wet strands across her face. She wore a ripped dress smeared with dirt and dried mud. Her bare feet were scratched as if she had run through thorns. She did not look up at first, only held herself tightly as if trying to disappear. Luke froze. He had seen runaways before, usually kids from the nearby reservation or the migrant camps, but never inside his chicken pen. He cleared his throat softly, trying not to startle her. "Sweetheart, you all right?" he asked. The girl raised her head, slowly revealing eyes that glimmered with an intensity far too sharp and old for her young face. They were pale hazel but shadowed with something heavy. She looked starved yet defiant. When she spoke, her voice was raspy but steady. "I do not want food," she said. "I want revenge." The words hit Luke like a blow. Revenge was not something a child should speak with that tone. He crouched down a few steps away so he would not tower over her. "What happened to hurt you? Tell me your name." She hesitated, then whispered, "Myra." Luke nodded gently. "Myra, all right. You are safe here. No one is going to touch you. But you need to tell me what is going on so I can help." She stared at him for a long moment as if weighing whether he was worth trusting. Finally, she spoke in a rush like words she had held in all night. "3 men. They came to our wagon camp 2 nights ago. My mama told me to hide in the brush. I did, but I saw everything. They took our money. They burned our wagon. She broke off her breath, catching, then forced herself to continue. "They dragged my mama with them. I followed, but I lost them in the dark. I think they headed into these plains because I saw their lantern light going this way." Luke felt his jaw tighten with a silent fury. The valley had its share of drifters and bandits. Sometimes they targeted travelers knowing no one would chase after them. But to take a woman in front of her child was more violent than the usual petty crime. Myra noticed his expression. "You believe me?" she asked. Luke nodded once. Every word. Myra let out a shaking exhale as if she'd expected him to doubt her. She wiped her nose with the back of her hand, leaving a streak of dirt across her cheek. "I came here because I saw the ranch house and thought maybe I could get help. But I was scared. I hid in the chicken pen so I could watch first. I did not mean to frighten your birds." Luke almost smiled despite the situation. "Chickens scare easy," he said. "They will recover." Then his voice returned to its serious tone. "Myra, I will help you. But revenge is not what you need right now. You need safety, and we need to find your mama." Her eyes flashed. "Revenge is the only way to get her back. Those men do not spare anyone. They will kill her just like they killed the old man traveling with us." I saw it. Luke felt a chill. Murder, this was worse than he thought. He reached out his hand slowly. "Come on, child. Let's get you inside. Get you cleaned up, eat something, and then we will figure out how to track these men." She hesitated again, her small body tense like an animal ready to flee. But then she took his hand. Her palm was cold and shaking. Luke led her out of the pen and into the kitchen. He gave her warm water to wash with a blanket to wrap herself in and oatmeal that she ate with reluctant bites as if every minute spent sitting still cost her something. Luke studied her silently. Beneath the grime, she looked like she might have been a joyful kid once. But terror had carved itself into her. When she finished eating, she pushed the bowl away. "I do not want to wait," she said. "We must go now." Luke sighed. "Myra, I need to gather supplies. I need to get my horse saddled. And I need to speak to Sheriff Daly. If what you say is true, and I believe it is, then he needs to know." Myra shook her head violently. "No, Sheriff. They work with one of the men." Luke blinked. "What makes you think that? Because one of them called the sheriff by name when they took our wagon." Luke felt the ground shift beneath him. Sheriff Daly was no saint, but he had never imagined the lawman would be tied up with kidnappers. Yet from the frightened certainty in her voice, he knew she believed it. Luke made a choice. "All right," he said. "Then it is just us." Myra's shoulders loosened a fraction. Luke went to the barn and saddled his horse Ember. He grabbed his rifle, extra ammunition, a coil of rope, a lantern, water, and a small first aid kit. Myra watched him with restless impatience, her fingers twisting in the blanket. When he was ready, she climbed up behind him, gripping his coat as tightly as if he were the only thing tethering her to the world. They rode out across the plain, following the faint signs Myra had remembered from the night she pursued the men. Broken sagebrush, a scrap of torn cloth tracks that seemed to drag as if one of them had been limping. Luke followed every clue with practiced eyes, and Myra pointed out each detail with a sharpness that revealed her determination. Hours passed as the sun rose higher. The plains stretched endlessly around them, golden and quiet. Too quiet. Luke felt the subtle tension in the air, like something waiting. They found the burned remains of a small camp first. Blackened wood and ash still faintly warm. Myra slid off the horse and knelt beside the ashes, touching them with trembling fingers. "This was where they stopped," she whispered. Luke crouched beside her. No footprints nearby. No drag marks. They left fast. Myra swallowed hard. "Do you think he put a hand on her shoulder?" "We do not know yet. And until we know, you hold on to hope." They mounted again, and Luke tracked the faint hoof prints leading north toward the old abandoned mining road. The further they went, the rougher the terrain became. Red cliffs rose on their sides, and shadows pooled in the ravines. It felt like a place where men with violent intentions would hide. By the time the sun dipped low, Myra tensed suddenly. "There," she whispered, pointing to a narrow gap between two boulders. Luke slowed Ember and listened. Faint voices drifted through the rocks. Harsh male voices. Laughter that carried an edge of cruelty. Myra clutched his coat with both hands. Luke guided her behind a cluster of scrub and dismounted quietly. "Stay low," he whispered. She nodded, her eyes burning with a mix of fear and resolve. Luke crept forward, rifle in hand, until he could see into the small clearing beyond the rocks. 3 men sat around a fire, passing a bottle between them. And tied to a post near the fire, her head bowed, was a woman. Myra's breath hitched when Luke returned. "Is it her?" she whispered. Luke nodded. Myra's eyes filled with tears, but her face hardened. "Did they hurt her?" "She's alive," Luke said. "Weak but alive. That is what matters." Myra turned toward him, her voice trembling with fury. "We have to kill them." Luke shook his head. "No, killing out of anger will destroy you, child. We will save your mama. The law can deal with these men later." Myra glared at him, but her anger broke under the weight of exhaustion. Luke touched her shoulder gently. "Trust me." She closed her eyes, then nodded once. Luke moved silently through the rocks, circling behind the men. When one stood to relieve himself, Luke slipped behind him and hit him hard across the skull with the butt of his rifle. The man crumpled without a sound. The second man reached for his pistol, but Luke kicked it away and slammed him into the dirt, pressing the barrel of the rifle to his temple. The third man bolted for the woman, but Myra stepped out from behind the rocks. grabbing a fallen branch and swinging it with surprising force straight into the man's arm. He yelled, stumbling. Luke rushed forward, tackling him. Within seconds, all three were tied with their own rope, unconscious or groaning. Myra ran to her mother. "Mama, Mama, wake up." The woman stirred weakly, lifting her face. "Myra," her voice cracked with relief. Luke cut her free. She collapsed into her daughter's arms, sobbing softly. Luke stepped back, giving them space. The girl clung to her mother, whispering over and over, "Mama, I found you. You are safe now." But then her gaze flicked to the tied men. She looked at Luke. What about them? Luke met her eyes firmly. Justice does not come from blood. It comes from truth. With your testimony, these men will pay. And I will make sure the sheriff does not touch this case. I will take it straight to the marshal in Cedar Ridge. Myra looked down, then slowly nodded. Her mother reached out, weakly touching Myra's cheek. "You did right, child." Luke helped them both onto Ember and led the horse by hand through the darkness back toward the ranch. Myra leaned against her mother, at last allowing herself to breathe. Luke walked beside them, alert but filled with quiet relief. The plains stretched silent around them, but the weight of dread had lifted, replaced by something steadier.